Il piano di pace statunitense già approvato.
The U.S. peace plan already approved by Israel, shared by European states, many Islamic states, and the Palestinian National Authority thanks to the mediation of some Arab countries, especially Qatar, which I think we all must thank, could also be accepted by Hamas. This would mean finally returning to peace in the Middle East, seeing the end of the suffering of the Palestinian civilian population, seeing the release of Israeli hostages held for 2 very long years. A light of peace is piercing the darkness of war. We all have the duty to do whatever is in our power to ensure that this precious and fragile opportunity succeeds. And I am proud of the contribution to dialogue that Italy has been able to give, at the forefront in humanitarian support to the Palestinian population and, at the same time, a credible interlocutor for all involved actors, always, without falling into the trap of frontal confrontation that many have often invoked. This is the vision that has always characterized Italy's identity, its action on the global stage, enabling it to be recognized as a privileged interlocutor and builder of peace, humanity, and solidarity.
Dunque, buongiorno a tutti.
Good morning to everyone. I greet His Eminences Cardinal Our Time and Cardinal Simoni. I recall that Saint Francis also taught respect. Respect in listening, respect in understanding, respect in grasping the reasons of others. I greet Monsignor Sorrentino, Monsignor Sabati, Fra Travarelli, the general and provincial ministers of the Franciscan families, the custodian of the Sacred Convent of Assisi, Fra Marco Moroni, President Proietti, President Marsilio, Mayor Stepini, Mayor Biondi, all the mayors, the authorities present, and the many people I see in this square. In my life I have been to Assisi several times, but this is the first time I participate in the celebrations of Saint Francis as the patron saint of Italy. It is truly an honor for me, but above all a very deep emotion because I know how much this celebration is rooted in the heart of the Italian people. A strong, authentic, and visceral devotion that clearly shows on the faces of the many people and faithful here today. It becomes solemn in the banners raised in this square. It shines in the light of the votive lamp which was lit shortly ago in the Basilica, burning thanks to the oil donated by Abruzzo on behalf of all the municipalities of Italy. Today, the Italian people turn their gaze here to the poor man of Assisi, the most lovable, the most poetic, and the most Italian of our saints, as defined by a philosopher and patriot like Vincenzo Gioberti. Because Saint Francis is one of the foundational figures of Italian identity, perhaps the most important. He wrote the oldest poetic text of our literature, the Canticle of the Creatures. And those verses opened the way that guided Dante, Petrarch, and Boccaccio, which made our language great and known worldwide. A cultural mission that reveals to this day its power and uniqueness. Saint Francis has left an indelible mark on art, poetry, theater, culture, and science. His spirituality has attracted and fascinated generations of Italians, inspiring some of the greatest men our nation can pride itself on. Franciscan tertiaries have included Giotto, Alessandro Manzoni, Christopher Columbus, Alessandro Volta, and many others alongside them. Saint Francis embodied the essence of the genius that makes our people unique, admired and appreciated worldwide. In the heart of the rock, he created the nativity scene, the sweetest and deepest universal representation of a God who became a child and came into the world to teach men what men had not known before. Forgiveness, even love for the enemy. However, Saint Francis was not a dreamy troubadour, but a man of action, quick almost to the point of rashness in the tasks he undertook or commitments he made. He did not like compromises, half-truths, or trickery. He was demanding, as saints are, men and women as ordinary as they are radical in the courage of their choices. Saint Francis was an extreme man, but not an extremist. He showed the example of poverty, but not that of misery, which he and his brothers always fought against. In the name of that poverty, he reminded all of us that nothing is truly ours. Not children, not the people we love, not our possessions or our bodies. Everything is a gift, the precious heritage of a God who loves us in our imperfection. He reminded humans that they are custodians of creation, and that life in all its forms is entrusted in a special way to the responsibility and care of humans. Because, as Pope Leo recently reminded us, we are nothing but careful administrators of that home so that no one destroys irresponsibly the natural goods that speak of the goodness and beauty of the Creator, nor submits to them as slaves or worshippers of nature. In the letter to the rulers of the peoples, Saint Francis urged those with governmental responsibilities not to measure themselves only by consensus but to keep in mind the greater horizon of meaning. It is a call that shakes and unsettles, and that does not give political instructions but moves hearts. And it does not leave people indifferent. Saint Francis was a man of peace, of dialogue, of confrontation. He brought peace inside and outside the borders of Assisi, carrying his message where no one else dared to go. Unarmed of everything except his faith and meekness, he did not hesitate to put his own life at risk to meet the Sultan and promote with him that dialogue in truth and mutual respect that still today represents a model. Because Saint Francis teaches us that one must try to speak with everyone, even with those who seem adversaries or even enemies. Where dialogue ends and patience with those who are different runs out, that is where the seed of violence and the virus of war germinates. It is a message extremely relevant today. Saint Francis lived through troubled times just like ours. The Third World War, fought in pieces, evoked by Pope Francis, is being consumed in a terrifying way. There are 56 ongoing conflicts worldwide, the highest number since the end of the Second World War. Peace, dialogue, diplomacy seem no longer able to convince or win. The use of force prevails too often, replacing the force of law. Yet, this seemingly dark and irreversible scenario cannot and must not push us to surrender. To surrender, that is, to the idea that there is no option other than war. Only peace, Saint Francis always reminds us, is not something that materializes when invoked, but that is built with commitment, patience, and courage. It is reached by putting one brick after another, with the strength of responsibility and the effectiveness of reasonableness. This is what we hope is happening in Palestine, a land Saint Francis wanted to know and that deeply marked him. The U.S. peace plan already approved by Israel, shared by European states, many Islamic states, and the Palestinian National Authority thanks to the mediation of some Arab countries, especially Qatar, which I think we all must thank, could also be accepted by Hamas. This would mean finally returning to peace in the Middle East, seeing the end of the suffering of the Palestinian civilian population, seeing the release of Israeli hostages held for 2 very long years. A light of peace is piercing the darkness of war. We all have the duty to do whatever is in our power to ensure that this precious and fragile opportunity succeeds. And I am proud of the contribution to dialogue that Italy has been able to give, at the forefront in humanitarian support to the Palestinian population and, at the same time, a credible interlocutor for all involved actors, always, without falling into the trap of frontal confrontation that many have often invoked. This is the vision that has always characterized Italy's identity, its action on the global stage, enabling it to be recognized as a privileged interlocutor and builder of peace, humanity, and solidarity. It is our tradition, the path in which this government also operates. Saint Francis was a bridge between East and West. A man who, by becoming small, called everyone to true greatness. Assisi, Umbria, and Italy, which gather today in his name, offer the truest image of who we are. Men and women endowed with 2 sources of knowledge and love, reason and faith. Because if you do not know who you are, you cannot contribute to dialogue between cultures. If you do not know and recognize yourself, you cannot love the other nor be loved. This is the culture of respect in which we believe and continue to promote. It is all these teachings and many more that made Saint Francis an explosion of life, and led Italians to elect him as their patron. A year ago from this loggia, a free and powerless poet, as he defined himself, made an appeal. Lyric and powerful, as is his wonderful style. Davide Rondoni asked politics to reflect on the figure of Saint Francis, to recover its deeper meaning, to reintroduce October 4th among the national holidays. And, as you know, that appeal was not ignored. As had not happened for a long time, the words of a poet resonated in Parliament, and Parliament turned those words into a state law. The legislator chose to restore Saint Francis, his heritage, his message, his charisma, to the public and civil dimension of this nation. Not a whim or even a waste of money, as some claimed, but a choice of identity. An act of love for Italy and its people. And personally, I like to see this parliamentary vote also as a tribute to the first pontiff who chose the name Francis in the year of his return to the Father's house. Next year, we will not only celebrate October 4th as a national holiday but also the 8th centenary of the poor man of Assisi's birth in heaven. We will do this by relying on the valuable work set up by the National Committee for the celebrations, also with government support. We have also worked to build innovative initiatives, capable of leaving lasting marks over time. I think above all of the digitalization project of the Library of the Sacred Convent, the naming of the New Industry Bridge in Rome after St. Francis, and the activities aimed at young people that will take place in Egypt and other African nations under the Mattei Plan, including involvement of the network of cultural institutes abroad to further spread knowledge of our saint worldwide. Dear friends, today we celebrate a man who gave up everything to find everything. A saint who taught the world the joyful simplicity of love. An Italian who forged the identity of an entire people. But we do not do this because he needs us. We do it because we need him. May Saint Francis help our Italy. Happy Saint Francis Day.